Arcus Chen adjusted his thick glasses for the 100th time as he walked through the massive crystal corridors of the Draconian embassy. His tablet clutched against his chest contained 3 years of research on interspecies diplomatic protocols. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The 24-year-old xenobiologist had been selected as Earth's representative not because of his social skills, but because he was the only human who could speak fluent Draconic after spending his childhood obsessing over their ancient texts. The corridor stretched ahead like a cathedral made of living gemstone. Crystalline formations pulsed with soft blue light, responding to his nervous heartbeat. Marcus had read about this phenomenon in his studies, but experiencing it firsthand made his palms sweat. The dragons could literally sense emotions through their architecture. "Dr. Chen," called a melodious voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Ambassador Zarathax, a smaller dragon who served as the cultural liaison. Her scales shimmered between silver and pearl, and her eyes held the wisdom of centuries. "The Matriarch is ready to receive you." Marcus nodded, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. The meeting had been arranged to discuss Earth's application to join the Galactic Council, a governing body that included 12 different species. Humanity had been trying to gain membership for 50 years, ever since first contact. The dragons, being one of the founding members, held significant influence over acceptance decisions. The great doors ahead were carved from a single massive crystal, depicting the history of dragon civilization. As they approached, the doors recognized Ambassador Zarathax and began to swing open with a deep, resonant hum that Marcus felt in his bones. The throne room beyond defied description. The ceiling vanished into darkness above, while the floor was a mirror of polished obsidian that reflected countless stars. It took Marcus a moment to realize he wasn't looking at reflections, but at actual space visible through the transparent floor. They were aboard a massive space station orbiting Earth. At the center of the room sat Empress Velithronox on a throne that seemed to be carved from a meteorite. She was ancient by dragon standards, her scales a deep crimson that shifted to gold at the edges. Her massive form could have crushed a small building, yet her movements held an elegant grace that spoke of millennia of refinement. When she spoke, her voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder. "Marcus Chen of Earth," she said, each word carefully pronounced. "Approach." Marcus walked forward on shaking legs, grateful for the countless hours he'd spent practicing Draconic pronunciation. When he reached the appropriate distance, he performed the formal bow he'd memorized, one hand over his heart, the other extended palm up in a gesture of offering. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said in Draconic, proud that his voice only cracked slightly. "I am honored by your audience." Empress Velithronox studied him with eyes like molten gold. Dragons were known for their ability to read other species with uncanny accuracy, and Marcus felt as if she were looking straight into his soul. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke again. "You speak our tongue well for one so young. Tell me, Marcus Chen, what do you know of dragon reproduction?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. His carefully prepared speech about humanity's contributions to galactic society evaporated from his mind. "Your Majesty, I studied dragon biology as part of my xenobiology degree. I understand the basic principles." "Basic principles," she repeated, a note of amusement in her voice. "Do you know why dragon populations have declined across the galaxy?" Marcus swallowed hard. This wasn't in any of his briefing materials. "I know that dragons live for thousands of years, which naturally leads to lower birth rates, and that finding compatible mates becomes more difficult as populations spread across different worlds." "Correct, but incomplete." The Empress rose from her throne, her massive form casting shadows across the star-filled floor. "What you do not know is that we face extinction within 3 generations." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus had studied galactic demographics, but the dragon population crisis wasn't common knowledge outside their species. "Your Majesty, I had no idea the situation was so severe. Few do. We have hidden our decline to maintain our position on the Council, but the truth is stark." She began to pace, each step sending tremors through the floor. "Female dragons produce perhaps 1 clutch of eggs every 2 centuries. Of those eggs, only a fraction prove viable. And of the hatchlings that survive, fewer still reach reproductive maturity." Marcus listened in growing amazement. Dragons had always been portrayed as the most powerful and successful species in the galaxy. The idea that they were struggling to survive challenged everything he thought he knew. "Furthermore," the Empress continued, Traditional dragon mating requires such specific genetic compatibility that suitable partners are increasingly rare. We have tried various solutions: genetic therapy, artificial reproduction, even cloning. Nothing has succeeded. I'm sorry to hear that, Your Majesty, but I'm not sure how this relates to Earth's Council application. The Empress stopped pacing and fixed him with her golden stare. It relates because we have discovered something unprecedented in our genetic research. Human DNA contains sequences that can bridge compatibility gaps between dragon bloodlines. Marcus felt the room spinning around him. I don't understand. When we first encountered humanity 50 years ago, we collected biological samples for standard diplomatic health protocols. Our scientists have spent decades studying them. What they found was remarkable. Human genetic material, when properly integrated, can create viable offspring with dragons, while preserving both species' essential characteristics. The implications crashed over Marcus like a tsunami. You're saying humans and dragons can reproduce together? Not naturally. The process requires significant genetic modification and careful medical supervision. But yes, it is possible. We have conducted successful trials with volunteer genetic material from various human populations. Marcus's mind raced through the scientific implications. Interspecies reproduction was theoretically possible between certain species, but the practical challenges were enormous. The fact that dragons had not only solved these challenges but done so secretly was staggering. The offspring, the Empress continued, retain the longevity and intelligence of dragons while gaining unique advantages from human genetic diversity. They are stronger, more adaptable, and surprisingly, more fertile than purebred dragons. This is incredible, Marcus managed. A breakthrough like this could revolutionize xenobiology. Have you shared this research with the scientific community? No. The single word carried absolute finality. This knowledge is restricted to the highest levels of dragon society. Which brings me to why you are here. Marcus felt a chill of premonition. Your Majesty, Empress Valithra Nox returned to her throne, settling herself with deliberate ceremony. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I have lived for 4,000 years, Marcus Chen. I have ruled the dragon territories for 2 millennia. In all that time, I have produced only 3 offspring, and none have survived to adulthood. I am the last of my bloodline, and when I die, a genetic heritage stretching back to the dawn of dragon civilization dies with me. Marcus waited, sensing that something momentous was coming. Our genetic analysis indicates that you possess the ideal human genetic markers for compatibility with my bloodline. Your DNA shows remarkable diversity and stability. More importantly, your psychological profile suggests the intelligence and adaptability necessary for the process. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the space station's systems. Marcus felt like he was floating outside his own body, watching this conversation happen to someone else. I don't understand what you're asking, he whispered. The Empress leaned forward on her throne, her massive presence overwhelming. When she spoke, each word was perfectly clear and deliberate. I desire an heir from you, Marcus Chen. I am asking you to father my child. The words echoed through the crystal chamber like a thunderclap. Marcus felt his knees give way, and only Ambassador Zarathax's quick intervention kept him from collapsing entirely. Your Majesty, he gasped. I'm just a researcher. I'm not. I've never. This is completely outside anything I ever imagined. I am not asking for your answer today, the Empress said, her tone gentler now. This decision will affect not only your life, but the future of both our species. You will need time to consider. Marcus tried to process what he'd just heard. The most powerful being in the galaxy was asking him to help her have a child. The shy, awkward xenobiologist who had trouble talking to humans his own age was being propositioned by an immortal dragon empress. What would this mean exactly? He asked, surprised by his own boldness. You would undergo genetic modification to make the process viable. You would remain on this station during the gestation period, which lasts approximately 2 Earth years. The child would be raised primarily within dragon society, but you would have full parental rights and involvement in their upbringing. And if I refuse? The Empress's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the atmosphere of the room. Then you return to Earth, and we find another candidate. Your planet's council application proceeds through normal channels, though without the significant advantage that this arrangement would provide. Marcus felt a chill. Advantage? A child of mixed dragon and human heritage would be living proof of the deep connection between our species. Such a bond would make Earth's Council membership not just likely, but inevitable. Your species would gain full galactic citizenship and access to technologies that could advance human civilization by centuries. The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a physical burden. This wasn't just about him anymore. The future of humanity might depend on his decision. How long do I have to decide? Take as much time as you need. Ambassador Zarathax will provide you with detailed information about the process and answer any questions you might have. You may also communicate freely with your government and family, though we ask that you sign confidentiality agreements regarding the specific genetic research. Marcus nodded numbly. I understand. The Empress rose again, and Marcus realized the audience was ending. Before you leave, Marcus Chen, I want you to understand something. This request is not born of desperation or mere political calculation. Our genetic analysis extends beyond biological compatibility to psychological and emotional factors. You were chosen not just because you can provide what my species needs, but because our research suggests you would make an excellent parent. The unexpected kindness in her voice nearly broke Marcus's composure entirely. He managed another formal bow. Thank you for the honor, Your Majesty. I will give your request the serious consideration it deserves. As Ambassador Zarathax led him from the throne room, Marcus's mind spun with questions, fears, and possibilities. In the space of an hour, his quiet life as a researcher had been turned completely upside down. He was being offered the chance to become part of something that would change both human and dragon history forever. But first, he had to figure out if he was brave enough to say yes. The crystal corridors seemed different as he walked back toward the human quarters. The pulsing light patterns appeared more complex, more beautiful. For the first time since arriving at the station, Marcus felt like he was seeing it not as a visitor, but as someone who might belong here. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. As the doors to his quarters closed behind him, Marcus sank into the chair by the observation window and stared out at Earth rotating slowly below. Somewhere down there, 7 billion humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that their future in the galaxy might depend on the decision of one very overwhelmed xenobiologist. Marcus removed his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. Tomorrow, he would start asking the 1,000 questions that crowded his mind. Tonight, he just needed to breathe and try to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. The dragon Matriarch wanted him to father her heir. And somehow, he was actually considering saying yes. The weight of choice. 3 days had passed since the Empress's shocking proposal, and Marcus Chen had barely slept. The luxurious quarters provided for him aboard the Dragon Station felt more like a beautiful prison as he wrestled with the most important decision of his life. The walls were lined with crystalline panels that displayed soothing natural scenes from various worlds, but Marcus found no peace in their artificial beauty. Ambassador Zarathax had been patient and thorough in answering his endless questions. The genetic modification process would take several months and involve gradual changes to his DNA to ensure compatibility. The medical team assured him the process was safe and largely reversible. The political implications for Earth were staggering, but the personal cost felt overwhelming. Marcus stood at the observation deck, watching Earth's blue marble surface rotate slowly beneath him. His secure communication console blinked with incoming messages from his family, his colleagues, and Earth's diplomatic corps. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, but the confidentiality agreements limited what he could share. Dr. Chen, Zarathax's voice interrupted his brooding. The Empress has requested another meeting, if you're willing. Marcus turned from the window. Has she changed her mind about giving me time? Not at all. She simply wishes to address what she suspects are your primary concerns. The Dragon Ambassador's smaller form still towered over Marcus, but her demeanor was gentle and reassuring. She recognizes that this decision is unprecedented for a human. Marcus nodded and followed her through the station's corridors. This time, they didn't go to the formal throne room but to a smaller chamber that felt more like a library. The walls were lined with crystalline storage devices containing thousands of years of dragon knowledge. Empress Velithronox sat in a more modestly sized chair, though she still dominated the space with her presence. Marcus Chen, she said, gesturing for him to take a seat across from her. You have questions that go beyond the technical aspects of my proposal. Yes, Your Majesty. Marcus had spent hours preparing for this conversation. I need to understand what kind of life this child would have. What their place would be in both human and dragon society. The Empress leaned back thoughtfully. A fair question. The child would be unique in galactic history. They would grow up within dragon society, learning our traditions and knowledge. But they would also maintain strong connections to humanity. They would be raised to understand both heritages. But what about their identity? Growing up as the only being of their kind could be incredibly isolating. We have considered this extensively. The child would not be alone for long. If this first attempt succeeds, we intend to expand the program carefully, creating a small community of hybrid children. They would have peers who understand their unique nature. Marcus felt a chill. You're planning to approach other humans? Only with the consent and cooperation of your government. This cannot be a one-time solution if we hope to save both species. Dragons need genetic diversity to survive, and humans would benefit enormously from the enhanced longevity and capabilities that dragon genetics provide. The scope of what she was describing began to dawn on Marcus. You're talking about creating a new subspecies. I'm talking about evolution, guided by science and cooperation, rather than left to chance. The Empress's golden eyes held steady on his. Your species stands at a crossroads, Marcus Chen. Humanity has intelligence and adaptability that could benefit the entire galaxy, but you also have shorter lifespans that limit your potential impact. Dragons have knowledge and longevity, but we lack the genetic flexibility to survive as a pure species. Marcus absorbed this perspective. And you believe combining our traits could benefit both species? I believe it could create something greater than either of us alone. But that is a long-term vision. Today, I am simply asking you to help me have a child. The personal nature of the request struck Marcus anew. Your Majesty, forgive me for asking, but what would our relationship be? I mean, during the process and afterward. For the first time since he'd met her, the Empress seemed to hesitate. That is perhaps the most complex aspect of this arrangement. Dragons do not form romantic partnerships in the way humans do. Our mating practices are more formal, based on genetic compatibility and mutual respect rather than emotion. But humans often do form emotional bonds, especially around reproduction and child rearing. Yes, our psychologists have studied this extensively. We understand that for humans, intimacy and emotional connection often accompany reproduction. We are prepared to accommodate these needs. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. I don't understand what that means exactly. The Empress stood and moved to one of the crystal storage units, activating a display that showed complex genetic charts. The modification process will create not just biological compatibility, but psychological compatibility as well. You will find yourself naturally comfortable in dragon society, able to understand our customs and communication patterns on an intuitive level. That sounds like you're changing who I am as a person. The modifications enhance your existing traits rather than replacing them. Your essential personality, your memories, your human perspective, all of that remains intact. But you gain the ability to bridge the gap between our species in ways that would normally take decades to develop. Marcus studied the genetic charts, trying to understand the implications. And what about the Empress herself? Will she? I mean, how does dragon attraction work? This question seemed to amuse Velithranox. Dragons are not driven by physical attraction in the way humans are. We respond to intelligence, genetic compatibility, and what you might call life force, the strength and complexity of someone's personality and potential. And I have these qualities? Your genetic profile indicates exceptional mental flexibility and creativity. Your psychological evaluation suggests deep empathy and strong protective instincts. These are highly valued traits in dragon culture. Marcus felt overwhelmed again by the clinical way such personal matters were being discussed. Your Majesty, I'm still just a graduate student who spends most of his time alone with books and computers. I don't feel qualified for any of this. Marcus Chen, may I share something with you? The Empress returned to her seat, her expression softening. 4,000 years ago, I was chosen to lead my people not because I felt ready, but because others saw potential in me that I could not see in myself. Leadership, parenthood, great responsibilities, they are not things we feel qualified for. They are things we grow into. The parallel she was drawing was not lost on Marcus. But the consequences of failure are significant, yes, but the consequences of not trying are worse. My species faces extinction. Your species faces potential exclusion from the galactic community and all the advancement that entails. Sometimes, Marcus Chen, The greatest act of courage is saying yes to something that terrifies you. Marcus sat in silence, processing her words. Finally, he spoke up. What would happen during the actual process? How would conception work with beings so different in size and biology? The genetic modification process addresses these challenges. Your human form would be altered to ensure physical compatibility. Though you would retain your essential human appearance and proportions, the changes would be functional rather than cosmetic. And afterward? During pregnancy? Dragon gestation involves the mother creating a protective shell around the developing offspring. You would not be required to carry the child yourself, though you would be deeply involved in the monitoring and preparation process. Dragon pregnancy requires significant energy and attention from both parents. This revelation brought some relief to Marcus. He had wondered how such biological differences could be overcome. There's something else you should know, the Empress continued. The child we create would not be the last of my line, but potentially the first of a new one. If this succeeds, they would carry the combined heritage of two species and the responsibility that comes with such uniqueness. That's a lot of pressure to put on a child. Yes, which is why choosing the right co-parent is so crucial. This child will need guidance from someone who understands both the weight of responsibility and the importance of maintaining humility and compassion. Marcus realized she was describing qualities she saw in him, though he still struggled to see them in himself. Your Majesty, what happens if I say yes and then later regret the decision? What if I'm not capable of being the parent this child needs? Regret is a luxury that parenthood rarely allows, she said with what might have been humor. Every parent questions their abilities. Every parent makes mistakes. What matters is commitment to learning and growing alongside your child. And if I say no, then you return to Earth with our thanks for your consideration and our respect for your honesty. We will find another candidate, though our research suggests none would be as ideally suited as you. The weight of that responsibility settled on Marcus again. How many other humans have you identified as potential candidates? 17 individuals across various human populations. But your genetic profile and psychological evaluation place you at the top of the list by a significant margin. Marcus felt the burden of choice pressing down on him. Not only was he being asked to make this decision for himself, but his refusal might lead to someone else being placed in the same impossible position. May I ask about the timeline? If I agree, when would this process begin? The genetic modifications would begin immediately and take approximately 6 months to complete. During that time, you would live here on the station, working with our medical team and learning more about dragon culture. The actual conception process would occur once the modifications were complete. And my career on Earth? My family? Your government has been informed in general terms about the opportunity to strengthen human-dragon relations. They are prepared to grant you extended leave for diplomatic research. Your family would be told you've been selected for an important but classified mission. Marcus realized how thoroughly this had been planned. You've been preparing for my agreement. We have been preparing for multiple contingencies. Hope is most effective when paired with practical planning. A long silence fell between them. Marcus stared at the genetic chart still displayed on the crystal screen, trying to imagine the child those complex sequences might create. Somewhere in those twisting helixes was the potential for a being who could bridge two worlds, carry forward the best of both species, and possibly change the course of galactic history. Your Majesty, he said finally, if I agree to this, I need certain conditions. The Empress straightened, her attention sharpening. Name them. First, I want complete transparency about the medical processes. I want to understand every modification being made and why. Granted. Second, I want input into the child's education and upbringing. I know they'll be raised primarily in dragon society, but I want to ensure they also understand their human heritage. Granted. Third, I want protections for my family on Earth. If this becomes public knowledge, they could become targets for groups who oppose human-alien cooperation. Already arranged. Dragon security will monitor your family's safety indefinitely. Marcus took a deep breath. And fourth, I want time to say goodbye to my old life properly. If I'm going to do this, I want closure with the person I was before. How much time do you need? 1 week on Earth to arrange my affairs and prepare my family for my extended absence. The Empress nodded slowly. And after that week, Marcus met her golden gaze, feeling as if he were standing at the edge of a cliff about to jump into an unknown abyss. After that week, Your Majesty, I will return here and begin the process of becoming the father of your child. The words hung in the air between them, carrying the weight of destiny. Marcus had made his choice, and in doing so, he had set in motion events that would reshape the relationship between humanity and dragonkind forever. The Empress rose from her chair and approached him. For a moment, Marcus thought she might perform some formal ceremony, but instead, she simply placed one massive clawed hand gently on his shoulder. Thank you, Marcus Chen. You have given my species the greatest gift possible, hope for the future. As Marcus left the library chamber, his mind was already racing with preparations. He had phone calls to make, arrangements to finalize, and a life to temporarily set aside. But for the first time since arriving at the station, he felt a sense of certainty about his path forward. The scared graduate student was still there inside him, but he was no longer in control. Marcus was stepping into a role he had never imagined, but one that felt increasingly right with each passing moment. He was going to become something unprecedented in galactic history, the human father of a dragon's child. The implications terrified him, but they also filled him with a purpose he had never known before. In 1 week, his real adventure would begin. The birth of something new. 8 months had passed since Marcus Chen returned to the Dragon Station and began his transformation. The genetic modifications had been unlike anything he could have imagined. Rather than the traumatic medical procedures he had feared, the process felt more like a gradual awakening of capabilities he never knew he possessed. His human form remained essentially unchanged, though he had grown several inches taller and his muscle density had increased significantly. His mind, however, had undergone profound changes. He could now understand dragon communication on multiple levels, not just their spoken language, but the complex emotional and intellectual harmonics that dragons use to convey deeper meaning. More surprisingly, he had developed what the dragon physicians called genetic empathy, an intuitive understanding of biological processes that allowed him to monitor the health of both himself and the child, developing within the specialized incubation chamber that Empress Vilithronox had created. The chamber itself was a marvel of dragon biotechnology. Rather than a technological construct, it was a living extension of the Empress herself, grown from her own cellular material and designed to provide the perfect environment for their developing offspring. Marcus spent hours each day beside the translucent, pearl-like structure, watching the small form within grow and change. The neural pathways are developing ahead of schedule. Dr. Kethanix, the lead dragon physician, informed him during their daily consultation. Her scales were a deep green that shifted to blue when she was pleased, as she was now. The integration of human and dragon genetic material is proceeding more smoothly than our most optimistic projections. Marcus pressed his palm against the warm surface of the incubation chamber. Inside, their child they had decided not to determine the sex until birth moved with fluid grace through the protective fluid. Even at this stage of development, the being was clearly neither fully human nor fully dragon, but something entirely new. How much longer? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Dragon pregnancy was precisely timed, lasting exactly 2 Earth years from conception to hatching. 6 weeks remaining. The child is developing the ability to survive outside the chamber. Soon, you will meet your offspring. The word still sent a thrill of terror and excitement through Marcus. Over the past months, he had spent countless hours with Empress Vilithronox, learning about dragon culture and preparing for parenthood. What had begun as a formal arrangement had evolved into something far more complex. Dragon emotional bonds were different from human ones, but they were no less real. Marcus had come to understand that Vilithronox was not just the imperious ruler he had first met, but a being of profound loneliness who had carried the weight of her species' survival for centuries. In agreeing to help her create an heir, he had also become her partner in hope. Marcus Chen, came the familiar resonant voice behind him. He turned to see the Empress approaching the chamber. Even after all these months, her presence still commanded immediate attention. But now Marcus felt welcome, rather than intimidated. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling beside him with the fluid grace that all dragons possessed. "Nervous," Marcus admitted. "Excited, terrified, all at once. Natural emotions for any parent approaching their child's birth." She studied the developing form within the chamber. "Our child shows remarkable development. The fusion of our genetic lines has created something unprecedented. Our child." Marcus had noticed that the Empress had begun using that phrase more frequently as the birth approached. Initially, she had referred to the child as hers alone, with Marcus as a necessary contributor. The gradual shift to shared ownership spoke to changes in her own emotional development. "Have you given more thought to names?" Marcus asked. They had discussed this topic many times, trying to find something that would honor both human and dragon traditions. "I believe I have decided," she said. "If the child is female, Sarah Lynn, it means bridge, of starlight, in the old dragon tongue. If male, Kai Theron, bearer of two flames." Marcus nodded approval. Both names captured the dual nature of their offspring while sounding beautiful in either language. "What about surnames?" "Dragon naming conventions are so different from human ones. The child will carry both heritages. In dragon society, they will be known as Sarah Lynn Valethronox or Kai Theron Valethronox, claiming descent from my line. In human society, they may use Chen if they choose to honor your family name." The complexity of their child's future identity was something Marcus had grappled with throughout the pregnancy. This being would belong fully to neither species, but potentially to both. It was a burden and a gift in equal measure. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Keitha Annex called from across the medical bay. "I'm receiving preliminary telepathic signals from the infant. Would you like to attempt contact?" Marcus's breath caught. Dragon children develop telepathic abilities before birth, and the hybrid nature of their child had made this milestone uncertain. The fact that the ability was manifesting suggested the fusion of traits was successful. "How do I do that?" "Place both hands on the chamber surface. Clear your mind of conscious thought and simply open yourself to reception. The genetic modifications have given you rudimentary telepathic sensitivity." Marcus positioned himself carefully and tried to quiet his racing thoughts. For several minutes, he felt nothing beyond the warm hum of the chamber's life support systems. Then, gradually, he became aware of something else, a presence that was neither his own thoughts, nor the background telepathic noise of the dragon station. It was not words or images, but pure emotion and sensation, curiosity, contentment, and underneath it all, a sense of eager anticipation, as if the child could sense that birth was approaching and was excited to meet the world. Tears sprang to Marcus's eyes as the connection strengthened. This was his child, their child, already developing a unique personality that combined the best of both species. The being in the chamber was aware, intelligent, and already forming the bonds that would define its future relationships. "I can feel them," he whispered. "They're happy." Empress Valethronox placed her massive clawed hand gently over his on the chamber surface. Immediately, the telepathic connection expanded and deepened. Marcus could sense the child's recognition of both parents, the way the developing mind responded differently to each of their mental signatures. "Our child knows us both," the Empress said softly. "The bond is already forming." Over the following weeks, Marcus spent increasing amounts of time in telepathic contact with their developing offspring. Each day brought new evidence of the child's remarkable development. The being was demonstrating intellectual capabilities that surpassed normal dragon children of the same developmental stage, while also showing emotional complexity that was distinctly human. As the birth approached, delegations from across the galaxy began arriving at the station. The birth of the first human-dragon hybrid was being treated as a historic event. Representatives from the Galactic Council were present to witness what many considered the beginning of a new era of interspecies cooperation. Earth's government had sent a small diplomatic team, including Dr. Sarah Williams, Marcus's former thesis advisor. She was one of the few people who knew the full scope of what Marcus had undertaken. "You look different," she told him during a private meeting. "Not just physically, though you're certainly taller. You carry yourself with more confidence." Marcus considered this observation. "I feel different. The genetic modifications have changed more than just my biology. I understand things about the universe that I never could have grasped before." "Do you regret your decision?" The question that had haunted Marcus for months now had a clear answer. "No, not for a moment. This child will be something wonderful, a bridge between our species and possibly the key to both of our futures." "And your relationship with the Empress?" Marcus paused, trying to find words for something that defied human categories. "Dragons don't love the way humans do, but they bond just as deeply. I'm not her romantic partner in any human sense, but I'm something more than just a genetic contributor. I'm her partner in the most important endeavor of her life." Dr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. "The political implications of this are staggering. Earth's council application has already been fast-tracked, The other species see this alliance as proof of humanity's commitment to galactic cooperation. That was always part of the calculation. Marcus agreed. But what started as a political arrangement has become something much more personal. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the medical bay. Marcus hurried back to find Dr. Keith Onyx monitoring rapid changes in the incubation chamber. "The birth process has begun," she announced. "The child is preparing to emerge from the chamber." Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he took his position beside the chamber. Empress Velithranox arrived moments later, her usually composed demeanor showing signs of anticipation and anxiety. "How long does the process take?" Marcus asked. "Dragon birth is gradual, Dr. Keith Onyx explained. The child will spend the next several hours transitioning from the chamber environment to independent survival. We must be ready to provide assistance if needed." The next few hours passed in a blur of medical monitoring and nervous waiting. Marcus maintained telepathic contact with the child throughout, offering emotional support and encouragement. The developing being's thoughts became increasingly coherent as birth approached, revealing an intelligence that was truly remarkable. Finally, the moment arrived. The chamber's surface began to soften and part, revealing the small form within. Marcus held his breath as their child emerged into the world for the first time. The being was beautiful beyond anything he had imagined. Humanoid in general proportions but with delicate scales that shifted color with the light. The face was clearly intelligent, with large eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Small wing buds on the shoulders promised future flight capability, while the hands ended in gentle claws suitable for both delicate manipulation and climbing. "Hello, little one," Marcus whispered as the child's eyes focused on him. The telepathic response was immediate and overwhelming, pure joy at finally meeting the minds that had been constant companions throughout development. Empress Velithranox leaned down to examine their offspring with careful attention. "Perfect," she pronounced finally. "Absolutely perfect." Dr. Keitha Nix completed her initial medical assessment. All systems functioning normally. The genetic fusion is stable, and the child shows no signs of the compatibility issues we were concerned about. This is a complete success. As Marcus held his child for the first time, feeling the warm weight of this new life in his arms, he understood that everything had changed. This being represented hope for two species, the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, and the most important responsibility he would ever carry. "Welcome to the universe," he whispered to the child, who gazed back with ancient eyes and a young face. "You're going to do amazing things." The child's name was announced the next day to delegations from across the galaxy. Sarah Lynn Velithranox Chen, the first of her kind and the herald of a new age of cooperation between species. As Marcus watched his daughter sleep in the specially designed nursery, surrounded by the most advanced medical monitoring in the galaxy, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The shy graduate student who had walked into the Dragon Embassy 8 months ago was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and ready for the challenges ahead. Sarah Lynn represented more than just the survival of the dragon race or the advancement of human politics. She was proof that different species could not just coexist, but create something better together than either could achieve alone. And as her father watched over her first sleep in the wider universe, Marcus Chen knew that his greatest adventure was just beginning.